What's going on, everybody? So we are going to talk about how to make a Black Widow melee build. So this is going to be somewhat of a template. We're going to go over some specific stat, perks, gear pieces, and skill tree selections that you may want to have whenever you are working towards your Black Widow melee build. And her melee damage is actually pretty insane, and it's always been like that since the game has first came out. But there have been a lot of people who have been pretty reluctant to use her melee, but like I mentioned before, her melee damage per hit is not as high as her range damage per hit, but it has been proven that there are a few melee setups that deal more damage per second than range setups. And it's not even always about the damage, because at the end of the day, a lot of it is having fun, and melee Black Widow is one of the most fun characters in the game. So let's go ahead and get right into it. So the main option that you have is using your ultimate or not using your ultimate. And I know it may sound like, okay, well, why would you not use your ultimate with melee attacks? But there are a few ways you can deal a little bit more damage by not using your ultimate. So starting out with the skill tree, if you're playing with any type of teammates, make sure that you have this one on. If you're solo, of course, have this one. Now, whenever it comes to the support ability, there's a huge difference between Night Terror and Dark Thorn. This is going to take your DPS on your melee attacks through the roof, because you're going to be critting a lot more often. This one right here is a very good setup for any type of AoE damage, and we'll get into it later. But just remember, you're going to want to crit. Alright, so the intrinsic section, I always run it on this selection actually. You're going to get a little bit more damage for melee attack than you would if you had this one selected. I know that this says 15% critical damage, and this is 5% total damage increase, but this one increases your damage more than this one whenever it comes to specific melee attacks. And for this section over here, for the invisibility, you're going to want to have this based on your crit chance and based on your selection as far as over here. So if you have Dark Thorn active and you don't have access to this extra 25% crit chance, then you're going to want to make sure that you have this one selected, more than likely just for you to have that extra crit chance in order for you to proc perks. The same thing over here, you're going to want to have melee charge active, and this will increase your heroic meter every time you deal any type of melee attack. Not only that, but this is based on your heroic recharge rate. So as you can see right now, my heroic recharge rate is at 35%. So every time I deal a melee attack, my heroic recharge is going to boost, and I will go ahead and do it right now. So let's go ahead and pay attention to the support. As you can see, there's a little yellow bar around it, and that just means that my heroic is recharging at a slightly higher rate than it normally would. And for this section over here, typically I'll actually keep it on the range specialization, because I found that by having it on this spot right here, it gives me just enough damage to one-tap enemies with my pistols or high caliber if the time comes to do that. And obviously for the heroic section, I'll usually leave it on kilowatt, because I found that having a good heroic rotation, you won't need to have this power grid on to extend the duration of it. And this is another reason why, instead of them giving us huge buffs, they should have changed things within the skill tree, because a lot of these skills, nobody would ever run these anymore. After you hit like 160, nobody would ever like run this skill right here, because you're gonna have like a high heroic recharge rate. So these things should have been looked at, but that's a whole nother story. Now for this section over here, typically I'll actually run it on galvanizing bite instead of the extra 35% increased staff damage, because her staff did get a huge boost a while back as far as the damage output. Now if you want to deal strictly staff damage, then of course you're going to want to have this one active, but I prefer to have galvanizing bite active, because I found that this was a little bit more beneficial whenever you have a nice heroic rotation, because you're going to be shooting off with those bites like crazy anyway. Alright, so for the minor artifacts, like one thing I've saw, like, or that I've seen with a lot of Widow players, is whenever they're trying to do melee, they'll not really run any type of statuses, and they'll dump all of their perks or whatever, their minor artifacts. They'll just run 2 triple valor ones. That's a horrible setup. So the best minor artifact that you can get for Black Widow whenever it comes to melee, and quite frankly I think it might be for range too, but I'll get into why this might be the best minor artifact from range and melee, because of the 2 perks on it, quite frankly, the vibranium payload and the lethal vibranium conduit. So of course the vibranium payload is crucial, and anybody running a Black Widow melee build, run a vibranium payload. That way you're going to double your damage immediately, right? But the lethal vibranium conduit, this is going to give you a small heroic recharge burst and an intrinsic burst anytime you defeat an enemy who has the vibranium status effect on them. And I talked a little bit about the heroic rotation earlier. That's going to help this skill out a little bit more, because you're going to be able to have access to this a lot more often by simply running this perk mixed with the payload. Not only does the vibranium payload perk proc from melee attacks, but it also procs from activating your ultimate and activating your support heroic. And whenever you're running this one, the support heroic right here, which is Dark Thorn, this pretty much shoots out a bunch of assault heroics and attaches them to the enemy, so you can battery off of the support heroic. And that's one of the reasons why I say whenever you're playing a range Widow, quite frankly, this could somewhat be best in slot if it comes with the right stat roll, valor, precision, and proficiency, because at the end of the day you'll be able to battery off of your Widow bite. But for melee Widow, this is kind of best in slot, right? Another few gear pieces that you may want to pair this with. One piece, of course, you got a triple valor piece that you're going to want to pair this up with. Any cosmic ISO of affinity you may want to also pair it up with as well. Might, valor, and proficiency would be the optimal role for it. And as far as the perks for your other artifact, there are 2 of them specifically that I would look for, other than the heroic assistance perks, and powerful breaker is one of the perks I would look for specifically. One of the reasons why is because he has 3 power attacks. That's 1 power attack, that's 2 power attacks, that's 3 power attacks. Actually, she has 4 power attacks, and that's 4 power attacks. So that's an actual power attack too. So any type of power attack damage would suffice. Another perk that you may want to also look out for is aerial boon, or aerial melee boon. So increased crit chance from mid-air melee attacks. So if you're dealing a lot of your attacks while you're in the air, which if you're in your ultimate you will be dealing a lot of attacks in the air, you can actually run critical damage instead of critical melee and still get the crit chance. And last but not least, one of the new best pieces that I've been able to see has been the Ultimo Stone, and you get this from the Mega Hive, and this is another version of it. This one right now, for me, it's best in slot because this does not have valor precision or valor proficiency and might. But as of right now, if you don't have a great roll on this one, if you have a roll with valor on this one, this would be your best bet because the stats go up a lot higher simply because of that. So as of right now, I'm running a setup like this on my minor artifacts, and sometimes I'll take this off. So if I'm in the OLT, I'll always run this one right here. But if I'm not in the OLT, I'll just put this one on right here, mixed with this one. Now slot 4 is not too hard to choose between, but there are a few pieces that you may want to have. The most damage that you'll be able to get from slot 4 is this one right here, and the way you'll be able to get this damage is by running any type of slot 1 piece that has the signature with the sonic status effect. So this combination specifically actually is going to give you the most melee damage, and you want to have that sonic on signature attacks with both receiving amplification breakers and stealth spike. You want to make sure that you have sonic on your signature attacks for 2 specific reasons. 1, because signature attacks can hit multiple enemies, and 2, it's one of the quickest ways to apply the sonic status effect or any type of status effect. So as you can see right there, I just did 1 signature attack. It did not fill the enemy up completely with the sonic status effect. So as you can see right now, my intensity is at a 25% stun. So if you want to fill an enemy up completely with one single spider sweep, then you will need at least 60% intensity on. So as you can see right now, I have 69% intensity. So let's do one signature attack and see this build up. As you can see, it build up immediately, and I'm a sender now. Now, if you're not 175, you can't simply put on one row of intensity and get to that 60% mark. But one thing you can do is put on a Tachyon's Eye. Anything with a cosmic potentiator specifically is going to boost your stun damage by 20%. As you can see, both of these have intensity on it, but this one has 20% more stun build up. Another piece to look out for is the Red Room Coil, and this is a pretty good piece. The Stealth Breaker obviously is very useful. This extra 15% damage, and this Spectre's Terror is also very useful, as you can attack enemies from behind very often, whether you're in your ultimate or not in your ultimate. Quite frankly, this is one of the best pieces as far as pure burst damage. So if you're fighting Claw, if you're fighting any type of boss, this is one of the slot 4 pieces that you may want to have, especially if you don't have a Reverberation Breaker. Now, one thing about these two pieces, like this Reverberation Breaker and this Stealth Breaker, or those perks specifically, is that they stack, but they don't stack with an equal amount of weight. So if I have this 15% Stealth Breaker on slot 4, if I have this 15% Stealth Breaker on slot 3 also, it's not going to be 30% increased damage. And the same thing applies if I have a 25% Reverberation Breaker on slot 4 and on slot 3. So you're going to want to have one of each whenever you're wanting to deal a maximum amount of burst damage with Black Widow. Another good option for slot 4 is this Lethal Reverberation Spark Belt. You will also get a high amount of pretty much immediate damage from running this, especially if the enemy is afflicted with the Vibranium status effect. You can find this piece specifically from Here Comes the Pain. Make sure that you open up the 3 chests right before the last enemies, and make sure that you open up the first golden chest, and you can get a piece somewhat similar to this. Another piece that you can look out for is the Edgewalker's Cord. They usually sell this once, maybe twice a week within the helicarrier. This piece right here is actually pretty decent for burst damage as well, if you don't have anything like an exotic like this one right here, a Reverberation Breaker. And what makes this piece so special, even though it's a purple piece, is this Lightning Potentiator. And whenever you are dealing melee attacks, when you're in your ultimate, all attacks are considered shock attacks. But the best slot 4 piece that you can get, and you can get this from the helicarrier and from villain sectors as well, is the Infiltrator's Belt. You can get this in different types of 16 hit buffs. The best 16 hit buff that you can get is a Heroic Recharge Burst, and the second best 16 hit buff, depending on the situation, would be a damage buff. And you want this with Might, Valor, Resolve, or Might, Valor, and Precision. Now, if you have a damage buff on slot 2, you want to have a Heroic Recharge Burst here. Now, you can mess around with the Heroic Recharge Burst and the Damage Burst with melee attacks and still have a very good heroic cycle, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But as of right now, whenever I'm really wanting to do a very good melee setup, I'll run this one right here. And that 3.2% stealth assistance, it's actually not 3.2% stealth assistance, it's a little bit higher than that. So anytime I go invisible, which right now I will go ahead and go invisible if I don't die. As you can see, my heroic recharge rate is at a 335%. So that's what that does. It's not 3%, it's 300 and something percent. Now for slot 3, there are a few different options that you can run. Whenever I am in an OLT or an Omega level threat or any type of Tachyon Rift mission, I will usually run this one right here for a straight up damage increase. That way I can have a 60% increase in damage pretty much at all times. So that's one setup that you could run. If you're gonna run any type of Cosmic on your slot 1 piece, this is not that bad to actually run, especially because of the status build up that you'll get from it and increased damage to Cosmic afflicted enemies. This vest right here, this is one of the probably her best vest. I would not say that this is best in every scenario, even if you do have Vibranium on the enemy. This one, quite frankly, is a little bit better than this one, simply because this is going to give you a little bit more consistent damage than this one right here. Now, if you are fighting claw, if you're doing melee attacks or whatever the case may be, you're definitely going to want to have reverberation breaker, or if you're fighting any type of large enemy that's, has a larger health pool, if you're going to be using vibranium, then you want to have reverberation breaker. But for mobs, you typically want to have this one on right here. Now, another piece that's pretty good is this Natalia's cloak, and you can get this from the elite vaults. This is a pretty good piece. It gives you a little bit of defense and a little bit of status build up also. Now, stealth amplifier, it says 20% status damage when invisibility is active. Now, as we all know, Tachyon Surge also increases status damage, but there is a huge difference between these two. Tachyon Surge increases your damage if you're dealing a status based attack. Stealth amplifier increases the status build up. So that's a huge difference. And this also has a shock potentiator, which is going to increase the damage for all shock based attacks. This one is pretty decent. It's not the best, and you can see I don't have it above 160. Another piece that you can go for is this Omega Guys right here. You want to have might, proficiency, and resolve on this piece, simply because of the reactive cosmic surge, but you would like to have a reactive payload on it as well. Now, the piece that's been slept on since the game is launched is this Red Room Corset right here. So this vest is somewhat equivalent to Hawkeye's Split Shot Multiplier, because Split Shot Multiplier comes with resolve, resilience, and intensity on it as well, but a lot of times you can still get a DPS increase from running it, even though it does not come with valor and precision on it. This vest somewhat falls into the same category because of really one main reason: the rampant assistance. But not only that, but Strike Rush is actually extremely helpful as of right now. Well, I guess as of forever, Strike Rush will not be extremely helpful to any players because there is no type of optional difficulty in the game. So as you can see right now, as I deal damage, my health is slowly coming back, and that is from that Strike Rush taking effect. Now, that Strike Rush and that Stealth Rush do go hand in hand with a few perks within the skill tree. This one specifically right here, so you recover 1 point of willpower when dealing any type of damage while overcharged. So that 1 point gets a little bit higher whenever you have this Strike Rush and the Stealth Rush. But as of right now, whenever it comes to fighting mobs, I will run this piece right here, and whenever it comes to fighting claw, I typically run this one right here. Now, for slot 2 on your melee build, the one that I would suggest the most is anything with a damage buff. Like, that's the first and foremost. You don't want to miss out on 60% increased damage. So even though this does not have might on it, again, this has 60% increased damage. So might, valor, precision, those are the stats that you want to look out for. Might and valor you would like to look out for too. So Spectre's Terror, this is one of the best perks that she can get on slot 2. And the reason why it's one of the best perks that she can get on slot 2 is because whenever you're dealing staff attacks, a lot of them are almost considered like attacks from behind, it seems like. So the chances of you proccing any type of payload just increase that much more. And again, this is probably the best in slot piece. Another piece that's pretty good for a Black Widow for slot 2 is this other damage buff variant with receiving accelerator. One thing that I actually used to do, mess around with before I got this piece right here, was run a vibranium payload, lethal vibranium conduit on my minor artifact. And whenever this lethal vibranium conduit would activate, I would switch up a little bit from a melee build to a little bit of a range build and start landing a few headshots. Now, one thing to note is that I tested it out and I tried to see if this 40% increased weak point damage would apply to Dark Thorn. It does not apply to Dark Thorn. So if you're wondering about seeing if you could run receiving accelerator and become a receiver yourself and activate Dark Thorn to get an extra 40% damage to your Dark Thorn activation, it does not work that way. But again, that's one of the best options. Now, if you wanted to, if you don't have access to these fontless buffs right here, if you wanted to, you could go with a simple proficient buff round. Now, if you do go with a simple proficient buff round, quite frankly, if you're going to run like this one right here compared to let's say compared to this one right here, you're going to want to run this one. So how we can compare stuff, right? So we're going to compare these two. You're going to want to run the exotic version simply because of the stats on it. I know this one has a damage buff, or the proficient buff has a damage buff, and you will get more damage from it, from running it. Even without the stats, you'll probably get more damage, even with might, precision, and intensity. But it still breaks the flow of combat. So if you're looking to have a little bit more fun with strictly melee attacks, just comparing these versions. So if you don't have you know, a fontless buff and you have to use the proficient buff, quite frankly, I find not running a proficient buff is a little bit more fun. So right now I'm running this piece on slot 2. Now slot 1, this is probably the one slot with the most gear options, and I'm gonna go ahead and put this piece back on right quick. So yeah, slot 1 is gonna give you the most gear options. Like I mentioned before, if you want the most damage, then you're gonna run this one right here. This fontless invulnerability gloves, any type of invulnerability gloves on Black Widow, go Sam, they all smack, because you can still proc your damage buffs and your reactive buffs while you're invulnerable and you're not gonna get hit. So it's pretty much a cheat code. Just a straight fontless vibranium gloves, especially ones with stealth Boon on them. The reason why these are so good is because earlier I mentioned that you want to have a vibranium payload somewhere, and you could definitely get it on your minor artifact slot, right? But this piece right here is so good because, one, whenever you have stealth Boon on, this 15% isn't just melee attacks, it's 15% for everything crit chance. So whenever you activate your Dark Thorn, or you activate whatever type of support heroic, even your ultimate heroic, right, there's a higher chance that that payload is going to proc. And not only that, but you can see right now my crit damage from being able to take this one off to putting on another triple valor went from a 480% to a 524%. So just having this piece on is going to allow you to deal a lot more burst damage just by simply critting more and opening up your minor artifact slots. Another piece to look out for is anything with Shadow Ops assistance, especially if it comes with a payload on it, or heroic recharge assistance with the payload. I'm still looking for that one day. One thing to note is that this Shadow Ops assistance does not stack. So as you can see right now, I'm gonna go ahead and become overcharged. Oh Lord! So as of right now, I'm going to become overcharged. And as you can see, my heroic recharge rate is 546%. And I have 300% recharge rates on. So as you can see, it's supposed to be like 600 or something percent, but it does not stack. Actually, it actually makes your heroic recharge go down. So as you can see, when I put this on right here, this 2.1%, it makes my heroic recharge go down a little bit. So this does not stack with the Red Room corset. And one thing I forgot to mention earlier, don't know how I forgot to mention this, the Red Room corset, you cannot get this anymore, but you can get this Vanguard sleeve from the Helicarrier. It's the same exact piece, except for this one is purple, this one is a legendary. Stats are going to be lower on this obviously, but as I mentioned before, this only comes with resolve, resilience, and intensity. So another piece that you may want to have is anything with a fontless empowerment. Fontless empowerments are pretty good, especially if you don't want to use your pistols at all and you want to become overcharged extremely quickly. One cool thing about the fontless empowerment perk is that even if you get hit, as long as that perk is active, your recharge meter will still go up. So as of right now, I got hit and my recharge meter is still going up because that intrinsic burst was still active. And you can see recharge burst is still going back up right after I get hit. Now stealth spike is another perk that you may want to look out for, and you can get this piece right here from Wakanda. I don't know exactly the date on this piece, but I know follow DJ Cole on YouTube, follow Nate Ace. They both drop a lot of vendor offline dates too, so this is one of the best pieces that you can get from Wakanda vendor also. And as I mentioned before, you're going to want to make sure that you have like a good bit of intensity on if you don't plan on using the ultimate, because quite frankly I find not using the ultimate a little bit more fun. So as you can see right now with 60% intensity, got the status effect fully applied. Now there is also one other thing that you could do to do, I guess, a little combo with this, right? You can deal the signature attack like this, jump in the air, hold dodge, and then press heavy attack. So simply all you do is do a signature attack, jump, hold heavy attack, dodge, press heavy attack, signature attack, and follow it into a heavy combo finisher. Now typically you have to do square, 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 triangle for a heavy combo finisher. So square, 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 triangle. But again, all you have to do, right? So signature, jump, hold heavy, dodge, press heavy. So signature, jump, hold heavy, dodge, press heavy. Another piece that you may want to have on slot 1 is this Gloves of the Storm. This is going to give you an insane amount of melee damage. Now one thing to note, this does not activate whenever you are in your ultimate, but you will still get a crazy amount of damage whenever you are running this piece while it's active. For Claw specifically, I'll run this piece. I'll get the Tachyon Surge buff active before I activate the ultimate, and then go to work with whatever attacks I really want to use. Another good piece to have for Black Widow is, like I mentioned before, anything with stealth assistance, and I'll leave a date for an offline date for this piece right here. This is a pretty good piece. Another melee piece you may want to look out for is the Hive Mind gloves. Now you don't want it with the PIM particle status effect. If you did get any type of Hive Mind gloves, you'll want it with heavy combo finisher and signature attacks, or light combo finisher and signature attacks. And you can't do heavy combo finishers in your ultimate. You can do light combo finishers in your ultimate. You can do signatures with both. You're gonna want this with the shock potentiator on this, because like I mentioned a few times within the video, several of her melee attacks have innate shock damage. The Omega Grass gloves, these are also pretty useful. I would not necessarily shoot for these gloves, but if you had some, they're not that bad to have. One thing to note is that the Cosmic Surge buff does not proc when you're in your ultimate, so we'll go ahead and try to proc this Cosmic Surge right quick. And as you can see, it's not going to proc, it won't proc in your ultimate. So if you use this Cosmic Surge piece, then you definitely want to not be using your ultimate. And like I mentioned before, there are benefits of running your ultimate and there are benefits of not running it. But the best piece that I've been able to find so far for Black Widow is this Fontless Spark with Stealth Boon on it. Now preferably you'll want to have Fontless Spark with Stealth Assistance on it. If you ever come across that, then you've got the best Black Widow piece probably in the game. So you really want to have Fontless Spark with the Stealth Assistance. But as I mentioned earlier, this Stealth Boon is extremely helpful. And with this gear setup and with this setup that I'm running right now, as I mentioned before, this is my main setup that I actually run during the raid, during any other type of missions that I'm running. Whenever I'm really wanting to deal any type of melee damage, this is the setup that I'm using right now. As I mentioned before, you can get a little different with it. Switch this up right here, put on the Lethal Vibranium Conduit if it had the right stats for it, whatever the case may be. So as you can see right here, I have Fontless Spark, and right here I have Fontless Spark as well. So these are pretty much almost the same type of pieces. This one has Shadow Op Spike, this one has Stealth Boon on it. So I've been testing this out a little bit, and I pretty much made all of my gear rolls and my stat rolls pretty much the same to make up for the lack of proficiency on this one and the lack of precision on this one. And from what I've been able to see, this Fontless Spark glove with the Stealth Boon, specifically with the Stealth Boon, will beat out a Fontless Spark with the Shadow Op Spike. Now preferably you'll want to have Fontless Spark with the 3.2% heroic recharge rate on it. That's really the setup that you will want to have. And the reason why this is so good, and the reason why this boon is, for me, in my opinion, from the things that I've been able to see, is more effective than the Shadow Op Spike, is because you already getting a lot of critical damage in your skill tree from everything from Your intrinsic is going to give you increased critical damage. It gives you increased critical chance too as well. Not only that, but you just have increased critical damage here, increased base damage here, increased critical damage everywhere, right? One thing that I found is that by being able to crit a lot more often, which this stealth boon will allow you to crit a lot more often, you're gonna have a higher DPS. And the same thing applies whenever you compare this glove right here to this discordant sound glove. So of course, yeah, you're going to get a way much more damage you're gonna get way more peak damage whenever you run these gloves right here, but the damage per second could be a lot higher whenever you're having this one, simply because you're gonna be critting and you'll be able to use your heroics a lot more in conjunction. So, and not only that, but this Fontless Spark right here goes perfect with this melee charge, and not only the melee charge, but with the Nornstone of the Vanguard. And this will pretty much put you in an infinite heroic cycle, because the Fontless Spark can proc at the same time that this Nornstone of the Vanguard lethal vibranium conduit procs. And not only is it this lethal vibranium conduit beneficial to you, but it's also extremely beneficial for your teammates. So this combination of these two perks specifically with the vibranium payload is pretty crucial whenever it comes to running a Black Widow melee build. And I didn't cover the major artifact actually, so let me cover that. So for the major artifact, the only ones that I will actually use, I really only use one. Sacred Nornstone of Lethal Will. I don't find myself needing any other major artifact for melee purposes ever. Tactagon is not that good, quite frankly. It's okay, it's not bad, but comparatively speaking, it's not close to the Nornstone of Sacred Lethal Will. I will run the Darkhold, but that's more so for a ranged setup. But yeah, thank you all for watching this video. If you still continue to play this game going forward at all, hopefully this video helped you out a little bit, and hopefully some of these dates helped out a little bit. And may we continue to have fun with this game for as long as we would like. Again, thank you for watching.